Okay, that's pasuk Aleph. We'll continue. Pasuk Bet. Vayim Krei Hashem. Very interesting expression. Vayim Krei. We literally translated being handed over, but it's a lashon mechira. They were sold out, right? It's almost as if God said, "You guys, you're on your own at this point." And who's coming to fight them? Biyad Yavim Melech Canaan Hashem Malach B'Chatzor, the king of Canaan who was in Chatzor. Is it the same Chatzor that we have today up in the north of Israel? I'm not sure. I don't think so. I think it's a different location. V'Satzva, Sisra, and this famous general Sisra. V'Hu Yoshe B'Charoshet HaGoyim, in a place called Charoshet HaGoyim. All these names. Some places have been revived. Some places not. All right, we'll go on. At this point, they cried out to Hashem. They've got real problem with this guy, with the Canaanim. If I say the word Palestinian, I'm sorry, I apologize, but the parallels from history are calling to us. No, the Gamri Lo, but the Lo Palestinian. But what they do is very. It has echoes from history to what's going on. And again, we spoke about this already before, but it's just kind of scary. And it says, he had 900 chariots. That's, if you turn it into tanks, that's enormous army. 900 tanks. I don't know if the Israeli army has so many tanks even today. 20 years of oppression. So this is the scenario, right? The Jews are being oppressed by this Melech Yavin, and he has a captain called Sisra, and without sort of going into too much detail, they're in big trouble. Now, at this point, they're looking for a new shofet. And here comes the bombshell. Pasuk Dala, Devora Isha Neviah. Devora is a prophetess, she's a novi, right? And one of the commentaries, I think the Radak, says that not a permanent novi. He's very uncomfortable. I think he's uncomfortable with the whole story, actually. But the Radak says here at the end of Pasuk Hey, just to read it to you, just 1 second where he says it, that I think he says here, she's like a temporary neviut. That's his comment. Nevuata hayta lezmana. She had a temporary neviut, a prophecy, ki lo matzanu la nevuah la'atid, not to prophesy the future. Whatever you want to make.
That says this manna there, he doesn't temporary means it's only for her time period. It wasn't meant the Devora, the other Nevi'im that are written down.
Correct. And therefore, and again, the question is he, my take on this is that he's playing her down completely.
Yeah.
Which is, he's really got issues with this, which is a little bit surprising because he's not about the 48, the 7 prophetesses, and she was one of the prophetesses, Yeah. Again, one has to put this all in perspective. We'll try and give a kivun in a few minutes, but let's just see what it says. But just think about the name, by the way. Devora, we know in modern Hebrew means a bee, right? She has a sting to the tail. There's no question. This is not a woman that, how should we say? To me, she's the principal of the school that you don't want to go near, right? She's up there on a pedestal. And if you have to go and speak to the principal, you take your life in your hand. This is sort of the image I have of Devora, this very correct, very interesting person, but very tough. And it says, again, Pasuk Dala, Devora Isha Neviah, Eshet Lapidot, the wife of Lapidot, and the rabbis give us a whole spiel about her husband. Lapidot was his nickname because he used to make wicks, right? Lapid means that, interesting, all these names of Israeli politicians that I'm reading here, but it worries me. But anyway, Lapid. Why did he make wicks? So that, again, a kind of very condescending explanation, because he wasn't such a scholar as she was, and she felt that at least he can contribute something to the Jewish world by making wicks for the Mishkan. That's a pretty derogatory comment, but anyway. Interestingly, that there are 2 other names. According to Chazal, he's also Barak, who we're going to read about. It's the same fellow, and he has a real name. His name is Michael. So he's got 3 names, 3 passports, right? Interesting guy. Here's Shoftat Yisrael Beitahi, and here comes the pasuk, the statement which we really have to come to terms with. She was the judge of Israel at the time. And as I said at the beginning, how do we understand her position as a shofetet, as a judge? We'll come back to that. Now, what happened? Pasuk Hey, V'hi yoshevet tachat chomed Devora. Interesting discussion about what this tree of Devora was. Toma means a palm tree. right? And there's a whole debate, what exactly. So one interesting thing, there was another Devora, which is a good quiz question, right? Devora back in Sefer Bereshit. There was a woman, Meineket Rivka, the maid, the nurse. And she was also Devora. It turns out it could be that this Tomer Devora was in fact the tree where the original Devora was buried. Who knows? Maybe. Not sure if it works out geographically so easily, because Tomer Devora here is in Yericho. That we do know. Because it says, Bein Ramah, Bein Betel, B'ha Ephraim, V'yalu Elel B'nei Yisrael Mishpah. The big issue is that why was she sitting here under the tree? It says because the Jews used to come to her for court cases, and there was absolutely no, what we call in Hebrew, chashash, there was no problem, no question of any improper behavior. Everything was open. Arbeinayim, everything could be seen. My wife's interesting, just recently, my son in Miami is teaching now at a brand new campus, and all of the rooms have got windows. There's no doors in this whole place. Internal.
All the outside
offices,
all the corridor walls into every single office, including the head of school, are all made of glass.
No,
Total.
which is fascinating.
Transparent.
Yeah, or transparent. Yeah, absolute transparency. But that's kind of extreme. But unfortunately, that's the world that we live in. It's really difficult. And but it's just interesting how significant, they felt it to be. So she's judging under the tree, open in the field, as it were, open court. Pasuk Vav. But Tishlach v'tikra leBarak ben Avinam. So she calls to Barak. As I said before, this happens to be this guy Lapidor. It's his other name, one of his other names. Mikedesh Naphtali, from that place, from Kedesh Naphtali. V'tam elah. And she says to him, "Hello, Tzivah Hashem Elokei Yisrael. God has commanded." She's Neviah. She's had an SMS from above. Lechu mashachta bahar Tavor. Barak, go and draw the troops to Har Tavor, to Mount Tabor. V'lakachta imcha 10,000 ish, with 10,000 men. Mibnei Naphtali, mibnei Zvulun. Har Tavor, you can't miss. It's the bump on the way up to. We used to travel very often. My grandmother lived in Kibbutz Lavi. You go through Afula, great Garinim and Afula. That's a place to stop to get the real deal. And after that, you stood Kfar Tabor. And then you see the bump on the left, this fantastic mountain on the top. I think there's a monastery up there, if anyone can confirm that. It's a landmark that you can't miss. It's really something. And therefore, if you go there with Tanakh Bayad and you read this story and you imagine what was going on up there, it's overwhelming. It's really very special. So that's Mount Tabor. That's where they're going. And there's going to be a significant event. And this is Devora telling Barak what to do. Pasuk Zayin. Umashachti elecha Nachal Kishon. And what you have to do is get to this Nachal Kishon. Again, for the people like the geography of the Bible, there's a lot to say about Nachal Kishon, but I'm not going to go into that. Whether it's there, where it is exactly in relation to Mount Tabor. It's Sisra Satzava Yavin, and he will come, and that's where you're going to meet up with the enemy. And basically you're going to get his chariots and his men and everything, and you're going to win. So that's the promise from Devora. Now here comes Barak with a statement which is so out of context in the biblical world. It's remarkable. Barak, so Barak says to her, "Im telchi mi balachti." Right, like Ruth. Remember, if you go where you go, I will go. If you go with me, then I will go. That's Barak talking to Devora. If you're not coming, I'm not coming. In other words, you're the judge, you're the inspiration, you're the people that the person that everybody looks up to. And if you're not going to be there with me in this crucial moment of victory, I'm not going to go. Right? And she is very reluctant to go. As I said before, the tzniut. She's in the open air. She's worried about interactions with the public. And here she doesn't want to be seen in front of the Jewish army. She doesn't want to be there. She wants to be, I suppose you could say, the power behind the throne. I once heard a shiur from, I think, David Gottlieb, one of the teachers at Samech, and he spoke about position of tzniut for women is the idea of the power behind the throne as opposed to being in the front lines. But I don't know, today I'm not sure if that really is a good distinction, but it's interesting. Certainly you get the sense that Devora really doesn't want to go and lead the troops. There's a wonderful, it must be on Netflix, has to be somewhere like that, a recreation of one of the battles of the Elizabethan era, and you see Queen Elizabeth, she's riding up and down in front of the troops trying to get them to, cheer for St. George and all the rest of it.
She obviously did not want to be jumped off.
And correct, and the whole issue of women doing that. I mean, Elizabeth was clearly, she did that. I mean, the Queen who just passed away last year, every year she used to do what was called trooping the colour, which was really sort of being in front of the troops in London. I mean, it's really an interesting. It was more of a spectacle. It wasn't really her, sort of going to war, but symbolically, that's what she did. Devora is not comfortable with this. Look at Pasuk Tet. But Tomer, she says, all right, I'm going to go. Efes kilo tiyeh tifartcha. But I warn you, this is not going to turn out well for you. On your resume, you're not going to be able to write something positive, because what's going to be the way that you're going to go. It's going to say that because of this woman, Sisera was defeated. All right, so if I'm there with you, Barak, know that this is going to make a dent in your reputation. But fine, but Takam Devora Vatelech in Barak Kedsha, they decided, they made a peace between each other, Shalom Bayis, and they both went. Okay.
That's why she should be so reluctant to go.
Yeah, again, I think this issue is the issue of Tzniut. She just doesn't want to be in front of. She's got 10,000 men. And she's got to galvanize the troops and get them, sort of cheering, and I don't know what, because part of it is the galvanizing the speech at the beginning, right? The Kohen Mashuach Muhammad, normally it will be the Kohen doing this, but here the impression is that by the fact that she's there, that gets everybody going, right? And I think that's her issue. Her issue is an issue of tzniut. It comes over with the courthouse in the field, and I think it's also here with the story with the troops. I'm pretty sure it's the same. It's my impression of her.
Can you imagine a lady run this country?
I can actually. Another couple of years. I don't think. Yeah, there's a woman on I-24 who's an ex-American lady who's an ex-general in the army. Is she? She's on the news station. I've forgotten her name. Miri Eisen. Yeah, who is pretty high up in the army, and I think she's now retired. But
the new head of the Air Force Base is
so it's not so far removed. But again, yeah.
I have a question about that. I'm wondering if in the Hebrew, I haven't read the Hebrew, so I don't know how the tenses are or whatever.
Yeah.
But when she says, if I go with you, history will write it down that it wasn't you.
Wasn't your finest moment.
It wasn't you that won the war.
Right.
But it will be a woman. Now, if she doesn't say it'll be my victory, she just says a woman.
Well.
Now, is there a hidden meaning to that? Because we know there's another woman involved.
Yeah. And you know what? It's also an illusion. She's a Novi, right? So maybe that's what she's actually alluding to.
Exactly.
And if
It's not just her.
It even makes it worse. I mean,
It'll be some other woman.
It'd be another woman also. Correct. The whole thing with Yael and what's going to happen later. So that's a nuance within a nuance, and that's excellent. Right. So I think it even makes it stronger in terms of her comment, and nevertheless, Barak says, you know what, Mashi, you got to be there, right?
See, Barak is interested in the outcome of the war. He doesn't care about personal.
He has no correct.
He has no. He has skin in the game, but he doesn't. It's not his skin.
Correct.
He represents Am Yisrael, and he wants Am Yisrael to be successful.
And he wants to win the war.
And he doesn't care if it's a woman or a guy. He doesn't really care.
Correct. But she is very sensitive to his reputation. Yeah. Oh boy, it's so interesting. All right, we'll go on a bit. It's not a long chapter, but you can see we're getting into the nitty-gritty. Pasuk Yud. Vayazek Barak et Zvulun and Naphtali catches. So you got all the people coming in. Vayal Baraglav, he goes up. Aseret Alfei Ish, and it said Yayal Loshon Yachid. They were very united as always. Achdut is our power, is our strength. We don't have to go far to appreciate that today as well. But Talimo Devora, and Devora sort of tagged along with it, right? Again, I get this feeling Devora is very, she's holding back. She's holding back. She doesn't feel comfortable in that exposed sort of leading the troops.
Are you sure it's she who doesn't feel comfortable? Yeah.
Or is it him?
No, I'm not sure it isn't the writer, because in these times, you wouldn't put the woman first.
Correct. Interesting.
And even when you talked about Sarah and Abraham,
Yeah.
the way it's written is to keep Sarah modest.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if this isn't written to keep her modest.
Yeah. You know what? It's interesting. And that's why I mentioned Rabbi Steinsaltz's essay, because he sort of alludes to, not here, but in her Shira, the so-called song, which turns out to be very vindictive. The mother of Sisera, but what she says at the end.
She's not shy.
No, she's.
She told him what to do.
Yeah, but
she says, watch out because it's not going to land on you. She's not shy.
Yeah, and it could be therefore the author, Shmuel Hanavi, who's writing this down for posterity, wants to get a certain message across.
It's just the way it's written in those days.
Correct. And that's a very good point. I'll leave it open because you can make up your mind about that, which way this is going. I just feel that because of the issue of tzniut, I really believe that is a big deal for her, really big deal for her in this situation. But I leave that comment, which is a great comment. Listen to this, Yudala. The Chevar Kainin Nifrad Mikain. In the meantime, another story which is happening on the edges over here is a guy called Chevar Kaini, Mibnei Chovav Chotei Moshe, who happens to be a descendant of Yitro, Jethro's whatever, I don't know whichever generation it is. But and he had his camp in a certain place set up, and again, there's in the neighborhood, and you go back to Sefer Yoshua, you'll see that Yitro was actually established. The descendants of Yitro went to live in, if I'm not mistaken, in Jericho, right? They wanted to be attached, but there's always a kind of question mark about their commitment to Jewish life, as there was about Yitro. Did he convert? What was? In the end of the day, I'll leave that for a discussion for another time. You'd bet. So the message goes out. The Jews are heading towards Mount Tabor. Sisera thinks this is it. We're in a position to win. It brings all of the chariots, doesn't leave one behind. Everybody with him. It's all going to happen at Nachal Kishon, this stream or whatever it was. But Barak, at this point, time to really get yourself together. And she knows there's going to be a victory against Sisera. God has been in front of you. All of the language of Devora is clearly the language of a Neviah. It rings of all of the connection to prophecy, the language of a prophet. And they start descending from the mountain, and Sisera is coming towards them. Tanakh Bayad, if you're over there, it's a fantastic image to create. Pasuk Tetvav, Vayom Hashem et Sisera et kol harecha. At that moment, there's a confusion. There's a tumult, as you say in Yiddish. There's a whole balagan going on, because the rabbis say there was thunder and lightning, and Sisera was absolutely put in a position. The whole army, they were petrified of what was going on around them. Nature, all of a sudden, took over via the obviously a godly command. And it says that and they all fell to the sword of Barak, right? They just couldn't fight. An unbelievable story. And Sisera decided, as opposed to the captain of the Titanic, he decided, I'm not going down with the ship. I am getting out of here. And he exits stage left, got off his chariot, and he runs. What a wonderful leader. Ubarak, in the meantime, Barak radaf achrei recha achrei machaneh. You got to kill the head. How do they call it here? The Rosh HaNachash. You got to kill the main guy. We're getting close. Please God, next time we meet, hopefully by then, he'll be a blip in history. I hope a very small blip. Va'ad Charosh HaGoyim. So they ran off to Charosh HaGoyim. Va'yipol kol machne Sisera lefi cherev. The whole camp was decimated. Unbelievable. 900 chariots and the whole works. Lo nisha ad echad, same language with Pharaoh, only one was left. Who's the only one? Like with Pharaoh, with the story of the Red Sea. Same thing over here. Sisera on his own. Now here comes part 2 of the whole story, which is truly mind-blowing. V'sisa nos baragla, he's on foot. El ohel Yael eshet cheva keni. So he went to the tent of Yael. Seemingly there was some sort of pact between the Canaanim and Cheva Keni, and he thought that this would be a place of refuge. He could hide away in the tent of Cheva. Cheva was not home. Don't know where he was, but Yael was home. She invites him in. Ki shalom bein Yavin menchatzor bein Beit Cheva Keni. There was some sort of peace between them, but the rabbis explained it was very temporary, and Yael knew that at this point it was a bigger mitzvah to kill him than to do anything else, and you'll see what happens. Unbelievable story. Yudchet. But Teitzi Yael likrat Sisera, and Yael comes out. But Tamei Lov Surah Doni Surah Kimaher, come in. Eli Al Tira, don't be afraid. Unbelievable. But Yosai Leo Hela, and he comes into the tent. You imagine this guy, probably 6'6" in all directions. The helmet, the sword, the whole Megillah, unbelievable. But Chaseu Basmicha, and she calms him down and she covers him over with a blanket. So it's a wild story. Pasuk Yudeh, but Yomei Leo, and he says, and he's almost timid. Hashkidi na, the na. I don't think they would have been famous for their etiquette in those days. Certainly not a guy like Sisera. Please give me to drink. Ma'ad mayim kitzameita. I'm thirsty. I want a little, give me a bissel Wasser, as you say in Yiddish. I want a little bit of drink. But tiftach et noda chala. She knew what she was doing. She gave him some milk. But tashkeut chaseu, again, covered him over. Bubala time. You can have a sleep in the meantime. Unbelievable scene. Now, what we're not told is what we're told later on. And I have to add this in, even though I'm sorry it might spoil your day. I apologize. It says later on in chapter 5, and we need to know this, what was really going on here was something really quite sinister. He just didn't lay down and go to sleep. She literally wore him out. You'll see, I'm going to be blunt because I have to be. Pasuk Kaf Zayin of chapter 5, when Devora describes the bravery of Yael, Devora says, Bein raglea kara nafal shachav, Bein raglea kara nafal, Bashe kara sham nafal shodu. Basically, she seduced him. That's the rabbinic interpretation. Rashi brings it over here. And l'shem shamayim. And what we'll do, I'm not going to do this time, but next time it's Hashem, we have to understand, even if Yael is Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai No, she's not Jewish, but she's they're definitely part of the what we call Ger Toshav scene, the people who accept upon themselves the 7 Noachide laws. The reality is she's performing here a mitzvah, doing something, a mitzvah of killing him through an avera of immorality. And that by definition becomes a very big question. The rabbis, there's a lot of rabbinic literature on this, and we get to a concept which is a pretty scary concept, especially when you're teaching it at high school, something called avera lishma. Doing an avera for the sake of God. Just throwing it out there to be discussed next time. We won't have time to deal with it today. But listen to it. We're going to finish the story. So he's worn out because he's consensually or not consensually. It seemed to be that this is what she did. Consensually with him, she wore him out to the point where he falls asleep. But he made sure somebody's got to be, the shingimel, somebody's got to guard the tent. And his whole life is so interesting. He said, if somebody comes and wants to know where I am, you have to say, nobody here. And, they'll go away. Truly, truly unbelievable. Kafala. But this is again, teaching Shoftim is wonderful with students. They love this bit. So what did she take? Yitchad ha'oher, she took the tent peg, the description, every detail. She picks up the hammer and she picks up the peg and she points it at his forehead. Boom. A permanent headache which he never recovered from. But it's not ba'aretz. He went right through his head into the ground. There was no messing around. Again, the danger, because if he'd woken up, imagine what would have happened. I mean, he would have flipped her, sort of pushed her away in 2 seconds. Unbelievable story. The bravery of this woman is truly, truly amazing. V'hu nirdam, and we know that he had fallen asleep already. V'ya'av, he was exhausted. V'yamot, and R.I.P. Rest in peace, literally. Kaf bet v'nei Barak. In the meantime, Barak turns up. After the event, such a great story. V'nei Barak rodefet Sisra. He's chasing after Sisra. Where is the guy? Where is he? But Tete Yael likrato. Yael comes out to say hello to Barak, who obviously she knows. But Tomelo lech v'areka. I'll show you where he is. Et ha'isha she'atam. I know you're looking for, and I'll show it to you. But Yavo Elel, he came into the tent. V'nei Sisra nofel met. V'yoted barakato, and he's got this big peg sticking out of his head. V'yachna, and that's it. We're not told anything more. At this point, we have to wait for the postscript that will come in chapter 5 in the Shira, the song that Devora composes, which again, as we pointed out before, is read in the Haftarah that we read a few weeks ago. The last few psukim just finish off the story, tie off the loose ends. At that point, that was the end of the battle, and Yavin is completely humiliated. Lifnei b'nei Yisrael, in front of the Jews, but Telech yad b'nei Yisrael aloch v'kasha, and now the hand of the Jews becomes stronger. Al Yavin melech Canaan ad shechritu Yavin melech Canaan, until they completely wiped out the enemy. Wow, it's inspiring, but what an unbelievable story. And again, I'm going to go back to the question that we asked at the beginning. It's all well and good to say she was a judge. First question, even before we get to the page, which I hope you all have in front of you, most of you should have it, if not all of you. There's another gentleman alive at this moment, who one would have thought, like we're talking about the American election, who is the guy to choose at the moment, not really great choices. But the reality is, when you've got this election going on, you've got Devora on the one hand, you've got someone who is major in Jewish life, in Jewish history, a gentleman by the name of Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen. He's still alive. And Pinchas actually does function as a kind of judge. We'll see later on in the story of Yiftach that Pinchas is involved with that whole story. So the question therefore is, why was Devora chosen over Pinchas? And I don't have a good answer from a text, but I have an answer from life. And the answer in life is a very simple answer, that you don't have Kanaim running the country. You can't have zealots running Israel. Right? And that's all I'm going to say. I'm not making any political statement, but Hamavin Yovin. It's really scary that, if you have the extremes running the country, I don't know. I just don't want to go there, but I think that's one of the real messages from this whole story. It wasn't Pinchas chosen, it was Devora. She clearly was a demut. She had a very specific image that she presented to the Jewish world. She was clearly learned, because that's part of the deal we mentioned before. The judge also is involved with the teaching and the limudim, and she's a wow. She's an absolute wow. Have a look at the page in front of you, and I just want to deal with her legitimacy. In the end of the day, we can wax really so much over Devora and what she represents, but bottom line is, was she absolutely allowed to do what she did from the point of view of, let's call it halacha, whatever you want to call it? Was she allowed to be a judge? Now have a look at the first quote, which is the pasuk from the Torah, where the Torah describes the law of the king. Ki tavo la'aretz asher Hashem Elokecha noten la, where you come to the land, v'yorashta v'yoshavta bo, you take over, you do it. That's why they didn't have a king on day one. It took nearly 400 years to get a king, because you have to conquer and dwell in the land. V'yomarta, and you will say, it's consensus, everybody has to agree to this. Osima alai melech, I appoint a king. Kachol hagoyim asher svivotai, like the nations around. And I don't want to go into the whole issue of kingship. That's for Sefer Shmuel, Mitzvah Hashem, in the future. But have a look at what the next pasuk said. Som tasim alecha melech, appoint a king. And it gives you a whole bunch of caveats over here. She'yivcha Hashem lekecha bo, God has to choose him. Mikarev achecha, from your brothers. Tasim alecha melech. Lo tasim alecha ish nachri. You can't take a foreign king. Ashalo achicha, who is not Jewish. So that's what it says. And I looked in Sefer, and he quotes Aderet Eliyahu, but there's obviously earlier people. Aderet Eliyahu is the Vilna Gaon, 200 years ago, but it comes originally from Midrash Halacha, from the commentary of the rabbis, the rabbinic fraternity of the first century, of the Common Era. they immediately comment, it says here, Melech, you have to have a king, below Malka, not a queen. Done. In which case, how do we ever understand Devora getting appointed as a judge? If the judge is parallel to the king, you've got a problem. How can you have a female judge? Well, because the whole limud, and this is really what the bit that I didn't bring here, is that the connection between the two situations, the situation of the judge and the situation of the king, in terms of precedent of who can become a judge or a king, is all learned from the same pasuk, from the same source. I can't prove it to you on the page, but there are other sources that give that connection. So you have to take my word for it.
Is that Midrash?
No, it's Talmud. It comes from Talmud. It's a Talmudic discussion, yeah. Yeah, and you can't, by definition, if there's a limitation on the king that it's got to be a man, not a woman, it goes right through leadership, goes right through from the beginning of the Shoftim as well.
I don't understand why it would limit the woman from, if you go back to the Imahot, they're basically running the show.
True, but they're not Shoftim. This is a question of this is behind the scenes. That's the whole point. This is frontal leadership. Yeah, this is a different thing.
Why are we so worried about a woman making a leadership move of some sort in a positive way when
I think it's the issue.
Why is it
Yeah, because I think all the issues of what we said before, tzniut and all the
changed.
it's
I don't believe that.
It's changing, but we haven't changed.
It's changing, but it's in the biblical world. It really was not happening. There was not female leadership. It really wasn't.
Well,
not in that sense. Not in this. Because what she did, she there were always strong women. I agree. There were always strong women, but not in this position of in I was going to say loco parentis, but loco regis or whatever the acted in. She's in place of the king. So by definition, she's doing stuff which is very unique, and very, very limited, at least in terms of the precedent, according to the biblical text, of who can actually be in that position. And by definition, it can be male and not female. That's the exclusion. It's a discussion in Talmud. It's a discussion in the Gemara. Sorry? Yeah. You had example that I always think of Jezebel, right? And then you had Atalia. Jezebel was in the north, Atalia in the south, but they weren't Jewish, so you can't really give them as a good example. I always said about the name is Zevel, by the way. I think it's a nickname because in modern Hebrew, Zevel, you take out the Zevel, right? Zevel is what they used to call her. I don't think that was her real name. Interesting because it talks about Naval, who was the husband of Abigail. Naval means a lowlight, right? So I think that's what they call him. He really was not a nice person. So in the Bible, there is a theme of these kind of it's called in Hebrew kinuyin, nicknames, but that's just a by the by. I just threw that in just to I don't know, to confuse you, I guess.
Made an interesting statement. Behind every great man, there's a woman.
That's it.
And even today in American politics, you can't get a woman as president. They're much better off behind the scenes. They have more power behind the scenes. Not saying that they can't be president or
What is interesting? I just want to take up your comment. I think I want to get through this so we can agree to disagree, but I'll have to bring in more sources. But have a look at this, because in the end of the day, if she is a judge, it's got to be, as to one of a better phrase, it's got to be kosher. And the problem is, how is it kosher? Look at this comment. I cut it down because there's a ton of literature on this. There are literally 4 comments of a commentary called Tosafot. The Tosafot is the commentary of the grandchildren of Rashi and other rabbis of a school of rabbis in Germany and in France, round about the Middle Ages, and they write on this subject in, at least I've got here 4 or 5 places, probably even more. And this is just one example of what they wrote. So, number 1, under the line, Isha psula ladun, right? A woman is disqualified from being a judge. Ditnam beparak bas siman, as the Gemara says in Gemara Nida, page 49. Kol kashe ladun, kashe laha'id, v'isha, etc. And the whole discussion about position of women in terms of the legislature. Fine. Don't want to go into that. That's a halachic discussion. Look at the next line where it says, Umidevora, What about Devora? In the end of the day, she was a judge. You've just told me women cannot be judges. And now we've got Devora, and she is a judge. Dichtiv ba v'hi shoftat Yisrael, the pasuk that we read before, she judged the Jewish people, says Tosfot, ein ra'ayah. There's no proof from here that a woman is kosher to be a judge. And here comes the biggest cop-out I've ever seen. The Shema lo haita dana. It could be that she didn't act as a judge. She was, what are we going to call her? The barrister? The educator. She was the law lecturer. She was the advisory. Right? We take an advisory on this. And the advisor would be Devora, which is clearly not what it means to be the judge. Sorry?
Says,
excellent. So what does Tosfos say? Vayalu eleo means not to get judged, but to go for a lecture. Right? She was the expert in dinim. Fascinating. The second answer is even more incredible. Inami, another solution, says Tosfot, underline, Shema kiblu ota aleihem mishum shchina. God had appointed her, and I don't know whether we say they had to accept her or they willingly accepted her, whichever way you want to spin this particular story. The reality was she was the judge by the appointment, not, as we say in England, not by appointment of the Queen, by appointment of the King of Kings.
Also by common consent.
That's
I, as a litigant, am allowed to accept any judge I want.
Interesting, and it comes out so clearly in comment number 3 from the Sefer Chinuch. What I did find is that the Spanish school was a bit more open to these ideas than the German school. Tosfot reflects German Jewry of the Middle Ages, and it was a little bit stiff and strict, whereas you go to the Spanish school, it's just fascinating how they have a different approach. Just turn over the page for a second.
Rambam on any issue of Shora, he absolutely, positively, right, forbids it.
Yeah. Well, Rambam again is a law unto himself. I don't want to go in. That's why I I cut out the Rambam from all of this discussion for obvious reasons. Yicholiot, that we can deal with the Rambam as a separate issue, and I don't want to get into that. That's when the halacha, the shir becomes halacha shir, and it's not for now. But have a look at this. Look at number 2. Famous Gemara in Shavuot 29b, and again the same question. And I apologize, this got messed up a little bit. The second line, I'll show you where to read from. It says again, V'hi shoftat Yisrael. Same question. How can she be a judge? Says Tosfot, Ikalameima shayta malamedet le'madinim. Again, the same answer, that she taught them the law. She was an authority on the din, but not necessarily the judge with the wig and all that. Inami lefi, and I'm sorry, you have to miss out the first 6 or 7 words. Shahaita, it's just towards the end of the second line. Neviah, we know that she was a prophet. Hayu makablim ota aleihem. How interesting. They accepted her authority because of who she was. Now that comment of Tosfot, I honestly believe, opens up a world in terms of the 21st century. To this day, there was, I think about a year ago, when I was still in, 2 years ago, I was still in YU, there was a big fuss made about something called Yoetze Halacha. There are now, I just want to say this, I want to add this because I'm really a big fan of what they do, and I don't think people understand what they do. There are now in the world approximately 170, 180 yoatzot. These are women who have studied not only significant sections of Jewish law, particularly to do with Taharat HaMishpacha, with laws of Nidar, etc., but they've also studied medicine. They have medical training in these specific areas. And what happens is, what has happened in the last 20, 25 years, is that when a woman has a specific issue in terms of menstruation or whatever it may be, she now, instead of going and having maybe a very awkward conversation with a rabbi that she probably doesn't want to talk to on these sort of issues, she now has someone called a Yoetzet Halacha that she can go to, and these women are amazing. I worked with, I tell this because in her honor, someone called Nechama Price is one of these wonderful ladies in New York. I shared an office with her, and I asked her once, how many questions do you get in 1 year as a Yoetzet Halacha? And I thought she'd tell me maybe, 25, 30 questions. She said 1,300 shilas. 1,300. She logs everyone. She writes everyone down. So my next question was, which I also thought was worth asking, I said, well, where are they coming from? Thinking this was the modern Orthodox world. In the end of the day, she's known as her husband is a rabbi in Teaneck, New Jersey, modern Orthodox community. She said to me, the shilas are mainly coming from Williamsburg, from the Hasidic community. And I said, wow. I said, how do you explain that? She says, because unfortunately in the Hasidic community, they've got Rebbes and even Rebbetzins who don't know what they're talking about. And they can't go and say to the Rebbe, they've got this issue because of cycles and all the rest of it. They just can't talk to anybody. So all of a sudden, the women heard about these amazing ladies like Nechama and a lot of other women like that in New York and now in Eretz Yisrael as well. And they're flocking to the Yoatzot. 1,300, Halavai, a rabbi would have 1,300 shilas in a lifetime. And this is 1 year of questions. It's truly remarkable. Why I mention it all is because what we just learned here, Makablim Alei, if the Tzibur accepts the status, like in the story with Devora, then there is a definite basis, a foundation for saying that not only is this to be encouraged, something that the Tzibur, particularly in our day and age where things are so complicated in the medical world, the Yoatzot, I told Nechama, and I tell anyone I talk to, there's another one here called Atara Ice, who's also from my community in America, lives in Israel. I said, you are literally saving marriages. It's truly unbelievable. Because the eitzes, the advice that they give, and when it's a significant halachic question, they are on the phone immediately to a posek, to a rabbi, to get the bottom line. If they feel they know how far they can give advice, remarkable women. And that's the yoetzet, as I said, which is the concept which I really do believe in. I believe in it passionately. There were still question marks. I know some rabbis in New York, one who I'm very fond of, but he said, well, I've got my Rebbetzin, so what do I need a yoetzet for? And I explained to him that, just talk to yoetzet one and find out what they know. And you'll realize not that your Rebbetzin is not knowledgeable, but in comparison to the yoetzet, there's a limitation. And I hope he thought about it. At least I hope he thought about it. Sorry? No, we're talking Manhattan, but it's a similar discussion. Listen to this. Look at number 3. I have to get through this. I'm sorry, I'm running over time, but I've just got to say that the Sefer Chinuch, what he says about Devora is truly remarkable. The 3rd line, and I've got it in English here. Devora the prophetess, she judged Israel, may be difficult to you. And the Sefer Chinuch, remember, was the book of the mitzvot written by Rabbi Aaron of Barcelona. I don't even know his second name. And he wrote it for his son as a kind of bar mitzvah present, I think it was. And it's the most classic book on Jewish law, on mitzvot that you could ever wish to read. It's phenomenal. And on the end of the 3rd line, as it is possible for us to answer that the judgment was not concluded according to her word. Rather, she was a wise woman and a prophetess. They would give and take with her, that she would be there to discuss, but that's one issue where maybe you're trying to play down her position a little bit. But look what he says she can talk about. Even about matters of prohibited and permitted, what we call in Hebrew, issa v'heta. That means she discussed matters of what's kosher and what's not kosher. And civil laws of choshen mishpat. She was there for everything. And hence it's written about her, she judged Israel, and she was the judge. So by definition, he's expanded her remit, that she's talking about not just issues of judging the way we explained the judges a few weeks ago. She's talking about matters of kashrut. She's talking about everything. And hence it's written about her, she judged Israel. We can say that the heads of Israel accepted her upon them. The same thing that we said before, the acceptance of the community gives the woman who is judging, in this case Devora, but I would argue today as well, the communities, and they are accepting these women. There's a miracle that took place in Israel, another miracle, right? There's always miracles in Israel, but yeah, and that's the brush at the end. He says, even if the tradition is generally that women are not accepted in certain areas of Jewish law, but the tzibur does accept her, then the Rashba here says, I brought that at the end, you can go by her decision. She can be, what we would call today, she can be the arbitrator, right? She can arbitrate very, very interesting, this whole discussion of it. I said at the bottom, 21st century, Yoetzet Halacha, Toenet Rabbaneh. I just want to mention about the Toenet very quickly. Toenet is the second miracle that I think is equally as amazing as the Yoetzet. This is the woman who stands in front of the Beit Din in like in Jerusalem, the Jerusalem based in, and it's all over the country, and she is like a rabbinic lawyer. She can argue halakha on behalf of clients, for instance, in cases of divorce, and it's a phenomenon. And again, the Toenet, I had one from my class in London who became a Toenet in Israel. It's amazing, absolutely amazing. They stand there, they argue halakha with the Dayan, and if you know the Dayanim in Yerushalayim, they're not famous for being men of the 21st century in many, many ways. I don't want to put them down too much because, it's a hard job, but the Toenet has been accepted and is, again, phenomenal. Where is the Makar? What's the source to accept? I would argue everything that we've been saying here, when the Tzibur does accept, and in that case the Beit Din does accept the position of the Toenet, the woman who is the rabbinic lawyer, then the doors have been open and they are doing a fantastic job. My only question mark from my traditional perspective is the Rabbah, the Maharat, Rabbi Weiss's extension of this, what Rav Riskin has done in Israel, to call women by the title rabbi. There were wonderful students in Barnard College when I was working there who went on to do this course, became Rabbah in America. I think one's in Washington now. Don't remember where they are. And I don't know. I just think that maybe I'm not ready for it yet. I mean, if the Tzibur is ready for it, that's a good thing. They call it Rabbah or Maharat. Now, what Maharat stands for, I don't know.
Maharat is
something. It's the female rabbi. Now, Rabbanit is usually the Rebbe's and the second half, the better half of the rabbi. Yeah. Sorry.
My daughter-in-law is doing this. She was at Migdal Oz, and she studied for years. She actually helped start the program.
And which program? The Rabbah or the Yoetze? Fantastic.
And so she is actually writing Shailot and Chuvot
right.
for Rabbanim,
yes.
Under their names with a footnote to her name.
To her name. Fantastic.
But that's okay with her. But the truth of the matter is, I don't believe that's a fair. I don't think it's fair.
I think let me
explain something quickly.
Yeah.
The thing is this, and you brought it up, is whether or not the community, the tzibur, will accept the woman's position and standing and knowledge in the community.
Right.
In her class, there was a woman who was hired by a Beit Knesset in Yerushalayim.
Right.
And she was fired within a month of the hiring because the men objected to her giving recommendations and chuvos.
Right.
And the rabbi said, when a woman comes in who knows more than the men, and it's an embarrassment to the community, then she can't be there to embarrass the men.
Yeah, and I'm sorry that happened. I really am sorry.
It's a terrible thing, but my daughter-in-law is in Naria, and she's writing all kinds of things. People are coming to her all the time.
Yeah. All I can say is
Rabbi,
make a connection between that and a yeshiva student who doesn't have smicha, but has all the knowledge of almost, but just do the exam for smicha or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, the girls can. Let me put it this way. It's clearly the bias. I shouldn't have opened this subject, but I suppose I have to go with it. The male bias is well known. I don't think I have to explain it. The girls, when they do study, particularly if they go to become Toenet, they do the rabbinic smicha exam. It's like 500 questions. It's a phenomenal exam.
High court had forced them.
And correct. And it's fascinating that the same exam is done, but the status and the whole. What I'm trying to say is the following: that it's going to be maybe our generation has begun the process. Certain shuls in Yerushalayim are not ready for it yet. Certain shuls, thank God, in America are ready and are embracing it. And in the course of time, as time goes on, more and more communities and countries, I would argue, because I think this is changing the Jewish world, will become more connected to this idea. Because it is such a positive thing. Now, again, I know rabbis who will disagree with me violently, and I've had that discussion with certain gentlemen in Yeshiva University, but I'm convinced. I'm so convinced this is the right way to go, by the very fact that what they do is literally saving lives. It's so
We're dealing
unbelievable.
with issues that women have, such as going to mikveh a day early because they have very short cycles. Nobody's ever thought that a woman who can't conceive can't go to mikveh a day early to catch that particular point in her cycle. And so that's what these women are now dealing with.
One of the
Can I ask
questions.
a question?
Yeah,
If we are starting to accept a change in thought, and that's what this is, it's a change in thought process.
correct.
At what stage do we look back and see the rulings from before that had a very different mindset to us and say, is that ruling correct? I mean,
Yeah.
it says here that because it says a king, not a queen,
Right.
then it can only be a man. No, we use the male for both.
Yeah.
So at what stage do we look
Well,
back and say,
maybe.
was that ruling made because of
Yeah.
it was in that time?
This is.
Or was that ruling
I'm
still
going to say something which may come as a bit of a shock to you, but I honestly believe the word evolution, not talking about the creation of the world, halakha is evolutionary.
But
and
can we look back and
possibly, yeah, I would say.
rethink some of the stuff?
Yeah,
Not
yeah,
undo, but
yeah.
rethink.
I'll give you an example, nothing to do with this subject, is, for instance, when electricity became available for everybody, there was many poskim, particularly in the Sephardic world, didn't understand remotely how it worked, but they thought that because, for instance, using electricity in Yonda, switching on the light, they allowed it, because they thought that the current was there the whole time, and it's like a burning candle, and you can light one candle from another candle on Yonta, so why can't you switch on the lights? Now, in Yerushalayim, there was a very great Gaon, Rosh Hashanah Zalman Orba. He was 18 years old. He sat down with a German Oleh in 1932, and he had we call in England chinwag. He spoke to him for about 10 hours explained to him how does electricity really work. And on the basis of that, he wrote his first book. He got a haskama from Rav Kook, unbelievable, 18 years old, this guy. Went on to be one of the great rabbis in Israel. And the reality was that, what I'm saying is that halakha is evolutionary in the sense that it develops and certain precedents are established, and then they can change, they can be modified. And this whole area of the position of women in terms of Jewish law is one of those areas which is clearly, being I'm going to use a rectify, but
it's going to evolve slowly because
but it's going to be slow.
Backwards,
Yeah.
where do you start?
Yeah, and where do you start? But what I would say is that one of the great, yeah, it
hundreds of years or thousands of years.
It does. We've been around a long time, so we've sort of seemed to, we have time on our hands.
Move overnight.
But what I would say is, and this is why I wanted to just bring this into the context of what we're learning, is that Devora, I hope, even if you say that she was the exception to the rule, and this will be very negative about her, she is certainly inspirational. She was the inspiration for the whole generation. And if she's the inspiration for the whole generation, all I can say is we're living in a generation, thank God today, where there are many women who are the inspiration for our generation. I've spoken to Chana Henkin, I've spoken to Malka Bean. These are amazing women, amazing. And, I would just pray that that shul in Yerushalayim come back in a generation. It might take a generation, but maybe the whole derech will change, because it has to. I'll leave it at that without getting myself into more deep discussion and the hot water that I'm in already. And Mitzvah